You did not just bring up Home Alone right now. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And nobody wants your boat, Dad. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Us.
It's specifically about us.
It's about you and me.
You and me.
Me and you.
And we
No matter
are Americans.
Oh, that's true. I was going to go, no matter how we toss the dice, we're meant to be, and only one for me is you, and you for me. So happy together. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I want to talk about this film. Okay.
You're excited. I can feel it. It's
yeah,
early in the morning. Have you had your coffee?
I'm drinking it right meow.
Oh,
I'm pumped. So last week, a very important and I think very good episode. We've been getting a lot of good feedback from it.
About the Finding, so I'm not the only one who's made that mistake. The Finding Neverland.
I too have said Finding Neverland,
which is the Johnny Depp film about Peter Pan.
Yes, or something like that. Yeah. But so it was our episode on Forgetting Neverland was very good, and I was glad that we did it. But I'm psyched to jump into something with you, which I haven't gotten to do in about a month. Of sort of like, not to say there's not meaning to this film, of course there is, but like sort of a horror. It's a narrative thing meant to entertain as well as educate.
I would say, let's talk about Jordan Peele for a minute, because the thing that I thought about after I'd seen this movie was, do you remember anything about the film Keanu?
The film Keanu? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about it, though?
I remember a couple different things. I remember the beginning with the cat running through the drug lab.
Yeah.
I remember the scene about Michael Bolton. Not Michael Bolton. I forget, but they're in the car waiting for, it was in Anna Faris's house.
Right.
And then she goes insane. I remember...
You remember way more than I do.
I remember a lot of the different places they went to, like the strip club that turned into like the actual back alley.
See,
like
I'm only
remembering
that now that you're mentioning
it.
I
remember
my whole point here, and I think it's backfired on me.
I'm sorry.
My backfired point was that I remember nothing about that movie.
I really enjoyed Keanu.
Really?
I think it definitely had problems. I mean, it was a irreverent comedy about a kitten and a drug deal. Like, it's not going to change lives, and it definitely didn't flex the same muscles that Get Out and Us flexes.
And
because he wasn't at the helm.
Yeah, Keanu wasn't at the helm. Jordan Peele wasn't at the helm.
Keanu wasn't either.
But the point there was that the post Key and Peele. The promise of the cinematic Key and Peele life after the TV show, it started off kind of pretty poorly, in my opinion, with Keanu.
I mean, I think if you look at sort of, I don't know, I mean, outside of like early SNL films, I think it started off fairly, not exquisite, but like a standardized, like, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, Keanu was rough for me, and the thing now is it's like 3 years on.
Yeah, and if you want to listen to our thoughts on Keanu, you can check that out with guest Chelsea White.
That's right. Yeah, the cat episode. But that movie barely registers to me anymore. So I think there was this fear coming out of like how great Key and Peele was as a skit show that these guys weren't gonna like go anywhere after that show ended. But boy, am I wrong? Because I think Jordan Peele is on his way to being, if he's not already right now, probably one of the most significantly important filmmakers in American cinema right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think though too, something we should remember, just sort of closing off your last point, the energy of the show Key and Peele was very haptic and was very sort of like off the wall, but like energy off the wall, but succinct in what it wanted to say.
Yeah.
And I find that works great in short form and sketch, but making that into a feature-length film is near impossible. Like, I don't know if you can actually do that without doing like a sort of like, maybe like the Key and Peele version of like a Ballad of Buster Scruggs, like an anthology, if you will. I don't know if you could actually ever get the same feeling that you get from an episode of Key and Peele if one of those sketches was extended for an hour and a half.
I don't think I meant that the sketches should be then extended into films, which is what Keanu kind of is.
Well, so that's the thing. That's why
it doesn't work.
Keanu was, but I think it works, but it definitely doesn't work like Key and Peele worked. I think they took what they could and extended, like they pulled the taffy as long as they could, but then they had to fill it with generalized movie trope stuff to sort of like padded out.
I'm impressed that you're being an apologist for Keanu at this point.
I mean, maybe you could go back and listen. Maybe I hated it at the time. I remember having a good time. I remember a bunch of stuff about it. Do I think would it ever fall on a favorites list of mine? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But I like dumb movies about cats. Yeah, why not? Key and Peele didn't hurt anybody. That's what, you know what I mean?
Keanu didn't.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Keanu never hurt anybody.
Not like The Cat in the Hat.
Yeah. Oh man.
The Ron Howard film.
Oh God.
A couple of other big announcements. Yesterday, if you're listening to this, is probably a week ago now, but the Apple had one of their sort of big platform launches, and they launched their Apple streaming service that they have been working on for the last year, which is so this is slightly different from Apple TV, which is normally just a distribution platform.
Uh-huh.
This is an actual service a la Netflix, which produces content, and they brought in some heavy hitters, including Kumail Nanjiani, Oprah. I'm not sure. I'll just jump over the other names here that aren't that important. Oh wait, what's this? Who's this?
Oh yeah, go down the list. Point right there.
J.J. Abrams.
Yeah,
okay,
sure. Yeah. I mean, dunk.
Wait, who's this guy? Bearded glasses.
Oh wow!
Steven Spielberg.
Spielberg.
Now I was away when this whole thing went down with Spielberg and Netflix. But you and Stephen Buescher kind of briefly talked about this. What's the rundown on?
I mean, long story short, old man yells at TV. No, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But not by much. Basically, Spielberg went on record. Or I'm sorry. Spielberg's people went on record for him.
He did say this.
Did he though? Because all I heard every time I read this, it was like Mr. Spielberg says, and it was like from a representative.
No, Spielberg, because Spielberg is also is on the board of directors of the Academy film of the Academy Awards, and I think his point there, I'm not going to defend it. I'm just going to say what it is, which is that he doesn't feel that films that kind of like token release in one cinema for a week should be eligible for the Academy Awards. He thinks they should be eligible for the Emmys, and his point being there is that the Academy Awards has a very stringent rules about what can be nominated for an Academy Award, and one of those rules is that it has to play in a cinema.
And one of the rules for winning Best Picture is it has to have some sort of racial relations and white people feeling better and driving. So I think some of the rules might have to be bent a little bit here and there.
So you're referring to the fact that he's a big fan of Green Book.
I'm referring to the whole shebang.
Right. No, but regardless of, because we didn't talk about my thoughts about Green Book.
No, we got a lot to catch up on. Last week was not the time. I feel like we can do it now.
We can do it.
Do it briefly, just briefly.
Green Book was the second worst movie on that list.
Agreed.
So it's not we're not in the absolute worst timeline now. The thing is, I have no feelings about this whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's what was interesting about visiting New Zealand is the racial dynamic that I think I talked about, and maybe that's come from me living here for the last 9 or so years. It is not a factor in New Zealand.
Right.
Like, people aren't talking about that. They're like, oh, this movie. It's a thing. When I grew up, like I mentioned, I think in our Oscar episode that I remember when a film won Best Picture, it would be like, oh, this film won Best Picture, let's go out and see it now. Whereas this was a case where this film had been out for a little while and it was being nominated for Best Picture. And so we were kind of, New Zealand is in a slightly different position. And so now people are going to go see that film in New Zealand. And the general sentiment of the people I talked to about it didn't seem to, the twinge that I got when I heard what Green Book was not apparent to a lot of people there. And maybe rightly so. They don't care. And they, like my mother saw it and she said, oh, I really like that movie. So, other people I know saw it and said, oh, I really like that movie. And so maybe we're making a mountain out of a molehill, but I still stand by what I said, which is that I think that this movie is slightly antiquated in its racial dynamics. The fact that it won Best Picture amplifies some of that problematic element to it. Back to the Oscars, I didn't watch it. Could barely tell you who won anything.
It was a better show than usual.
Alfonso Cuarón won Best Director.
Yeah.
Roma won Best Foreign Film. Right. I think so.
Yeah, probably.
Olivia Colman won Best Actress. Rami Malek won Best Actor. cool. No feelings one way or the other about it. The fact that Green Book won is not surprising to me. Very disappointing. Your pick was Black Panther,
Yeah.
if I'm remembering correctly, and mine was Roma.
Mm-hmm. I mean, here's the thing. Jumping back to the Spielberg conversation, if Spielberg and the ilk got their way, your favorite movie would not have been able to have been nominated.
Yeah, Roma wouldn't have been able to be nominated. And I think his point there, and I'm not defending it, is that a film, the Academy's traditional rules has been that a film has to be released in a theater for a long period of time. It's not a direct-to-video. He's kind of equating Netflix as almost a direct-to-video kind of service.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not. But I think, it's not. It's very antiquated. And then his appearance at the Apple launch kind of for people that he rubbed the wrong way with the Netflix comments, his appearance there kind of probably amplified that. Now, I don't think his appearance there is entirely contradictory, because he's not there trying to say that the show he's producing, which is Amazing Stories, a remake of Amazing Stories, he's not there saying that Amazing Stories should be on.
Sure,
but it felt like his comments were a dig at streaming services, whereas his comments were a dig at streaming services getting into the Academy Awards, which is it's nuanced, it's slightly different.
It is slightly different, but you also have to look at what. I mean, he's having cake and eating it too. He's not entirely contradicting himself, but he's also really feeding into who's paying him. I mean, he is. I mean, granted, he's not saying that, like, I'm going to go now make a movie for iTunes or for Apple and it needs to be in the Academy Awards.
Yeah, he's not saying that.
No, he's not.
Yeah.
But there's still streaming services that make their own content, and he was delegitimizing a competitor at this point.
Yeah.
And that's
dumb. that makes it look like he's on one side. I don't think he's actually on a side.
I actually don't either. Yeah. I think he's again. I hate doing this. Is very ageist of me, but like we too shall get there one day.
Yeah.
But at the current time, I just don't know if as far as the way people interact with media, if people of certain generations fully understand it and fully understand the interconnectivity of, say, if you say something bad about one streaming service and then you go take a check from another streaming service, they might not see it as the same thing, or they might have such a hard line between what is a film and what is a So it's a matter of perspective, and I think it's a matter of being entrenched in your own way of thinking.
Yeah, and I think Alfonso Cuarón said it best, which is that he made a black and white period film with no stars in a foreign language, and that film got to be seen by millions of people around the world because of Netflix distribution platform.
Yeah,
which it would, like he said, if we had to go the old route, I doubt this would happen. And my only similar experience with this is that, for example, I work in short films, is that I've been to film festivals with my short films, and I would say, and film festivals are kind of the more prestigious way to go. If you can win an award at Sundance or something like that, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But I've been to film festivals where we've done everything we can to try and get into a film festival. We've gotten to really prestigious ones, and like 10 people have come to see the film. I launched my film online, and 100,000 people watched it within a week.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And it's just a difference of volume at that point. I will just kind of lean to just an alternate voice, which is a person who I love, who I think is very progressive in this sort of work, and that's Steven Soderbergh. He just released a film on Netflix. He's released a couple of films. No, he released a specific film on Netflix, which I watched while I was overseas, called High Flying Bird, which was shot on an iPhone. It's an okay film. Is it
shot by a high flying bird?
It is shot by high flying bird. It's all drone shots the whole day. Every actor scene.
You see Neverland in there somewhere?
Yeah. Let's not bring it back there.
I mean, or any documentary ever. You see the town from Making a Murderer. You see it, whatever. Yeah. Every current documentary is rife with drone shots.
Okay, but that's not exactly what High Flying Bird is. It's a basketball movie. But Soderbergh did an interview with the Hollywood Reporter, and he said this, which I thought was kind of just a good counterbalance voice. He said, "I'm agnostic in terms of platforms. I think we have to acknowledge that why people go to the movies has changed, and the very real fact that when I was growing up, there was a big difference between watching watching on TV and going to the movies because TV was really shitty. He's referring to back in the day. That's not the case anymore. I was watching Mindhunter the other night on 4K HDR on a pretty large Sony monitor, and it's stunning. So you're asking people to leave what in some cases is a mini theater to go to another theater where you might have an experience that is not as satisfying, not cheap. And I'm not romantic when it comes to that stuff. Story is story. And I think that's a great approach. I think Christopher Nolan's been clapping back at Steven Soderbergh for a little while, and Steven Soderbergh clapped back so perfectly. Christopher Nolan said, "When are you going to shoot on film again?" Because Steven Soderbergh, is pioneering all these new digital technologies, and Steven Soderbergh responded with, "When you start writing your scripts in pencil." So I love this clapback. I don't think it matters much. I think Netflix, the fact that Roma came out on Netflix is wonderful, and people got to see it.
Soderbergh just jumped up my directorial list on one tweet. That's just phenomenal.
Soderbergh is wonderful.
That's so funny.
We've got to remember as well, just a little bit of historical context. Christopher Nolan owes his career to Steven Soderbergh.
Listen, that's fine, but you can't forever be indebted to someone that you start to disagree with as you get older, like however many years later.
So it's all changing. I love the fact that these new platforms coming out. The other thing is that we didn't really briefly talk about. I know we should get to the movie.
No, we got some stuff.
Disney Plus. Disney merged with Fox recently, so I think that wouldn't. In my mind, I'm not sure if this is the case, but that means that Disney Plus, the streaming platform that Disney is working on right now, will eventually be able to house many of the Fox properties in it.
Yeah. Yep.
As well, I think for you this is kind of exciting because now Fox is part of Disney, which means the X-Men can now be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny? I trust that they'll do it well, and I think it'll be fun, and I think whatever. I don't particularly care right now about the X-Men. I think I've been beaten down so much just from you get fed something so much that's mediocre or bad, and you're just sort of like, okay.
I like Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past was fun.
Yeah, even though it was directed by Bryan Singer. But,
and then but it breaks down into my sort of DC universe. It's taking a lot to have me get back into that. And I think they're on the right path. Wonder Woman, I heard Aquaman was fun, and Shazam's getting great reviews. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Is wonderful.
So I mean that'll be neat.
Yeah.
But I haven't been. I'm more excited, honestly, about the sort of more fringe stuff, kind of fringe, but Fantastic Four.
Right.
That seems like that's a more cohesive fit into my Marvel stories.
I think the thing is X-Men is sort of well established what it can be at this point, so they have to really redefine it. Whereas Fantastic Four hasn't quite found its footing. In the Disney world. The main thing for me is the Disney streaming service now could include The Simpsons, and it could
include The Simpsons,
and that to me is a big deal. That Disney has to. Is basically trying to distinguish itself from Netflix, and it
won't really be able to do that until I think 2021 or something like that.
Yeah, they've got a lot of content on Netflix, and basically they're slowly pulling all of that content back, creating their own service, and it's frustrating for us. I would love if there was just one place I went to for all my content.
Yeah,
but at the same time,
that was also never the case.
Yeah, I guess I've enjoyed Netflix because it's the sort of center hub of where I go to get content. I guess I also like the Apple TV in that respect because then it can pull from different content.
See, I don't do that. I use the PlayStation, and
right. But it's the same deal, right?
Well, it's the same deal, but I can't search in one search bar and find a thing across multiple platforms.
I actually can't do that in Apple TV.
I got 3. I got Netflix, I got Hulu, I got HBO Go.
Right.
And those are my contents that I put into my home.
Yeah,
and
I have one and Amazon.
I have
Prime.
one. Oh, and I have Prime as well. 4.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I have these 4 outlets that literally I go down into a drop-down menu in the PS4, and they're all there, and YouTube and Twitch.
Right.
I guess. So those are my channels as it is right now. And I don't know. Disney owns so much now that I enjoy that I will probably just buy this, especially if it's something that's not exorbitant. If it's another $10 a month, I don't really have an issue as long as it offers me a bunch of things that I want.
Right.
I think the Marvel and Netflix thing was such a dream. This is the thing I love about people that sort of naysay Netflix or try to get down on Netflix for being a bad thing in multiple different ways. It is still the place that for a very long time allowed everybody to see a ton of stuff for an incredible cheap amount of money.
Yeah.
And when it goes up $1, I'm just sure.
Yeah.
It's when if it ever started to do a movie pass type thing where it's it's $50, it's $6, it's $120, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
What? But it's never done that. If Disney's comparable, I will be picking up the Disney one. They own enough of the stuff that I love, and I would like to just vote with my dollars a little bit, and maybe finally, with Disney's backing and the love they might be able to put behind a franchise, I might one day see an actual Buffy HD remaster, not the shit that they had computers automatically do that they had on Netflix for a while, and now it's on like Hulu UK.
Okay.
They long story short, they basically like threw the old film through like a computer program that either punched in way too close to make it still widescreen, so destroying framing. It put on a soft filter to like make it less grainy, even though it was shot on Super 16, which makes it look like everyone's in a rubber mask. Yeah. And then the color grading is just gone. So day for night shots now look like they're at day.
Okay.
And it's terrible. And I'm hoping that maybe Disney might be like, hey, this is garbage. Maybe we'll try to do it again.
I don't know if Buffy is part of the Fox.
It's Fox.
It's Fox, okay. Yep. So for me, again, the one thing that I've kind of always just been yearning for, just because it's a nostalgia factor for me, but I also think it's a great show, is The Simpsons.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get a streaming service of The Simpsons. It's a lot of content.
And you could, that's the thing where you could... if you wanted, I bet, like have like a random thing, like if they had it all available, just like have The Simpsons is playing randomly.
Oh, I would love that. I think the thing there is that the way to get The Simpsons streaming right now, the only way to get the old copies of The Simpsons is I think you can buy it on iTunes, which is expensive.
Yep.
You can buy DVDs, which is expensive, or you have to. There's a Fox streaming service, but you have to have cable box to get that.
Yeah,
I don't have.
It's like same with CBS All Access. I think,
yeah. So the idea that The Simpsons will become available that way is kind of exciting to me. But anyway.
I have one more thing I just want to bring up
sure.
very quickly. The Queens World Film Festival. I went to a screening last Friday for a friend of the show, Carly Houston,
she
had a film in the It Gets Better block. It was 6 films with messages of hope for LGBTQ youth. It was really good.
Her
film Misdirection was phenomenal. If you can find it somewhere playing near you, please go see it. It was definitely the most sort of, I don't know how to put it, but like it hit every box for me where a lot of the other films hit many boxes, but that one, and I do want to give a shout out to another one called I'm Just Here, which was about a suicide prevention hotline worker.
Okay.
Those were two.
That, who's starring in that? Is that what's her name from Happy Go Lucky and Shape of Water?
No.
Okay, sorry, never mind.
But no, Misdirection was phenomenal, and it spoke to everything I know Carly loves, and it was so nice to see like her brain on the big screen, like for everyone to sort of like crawl inside for a short while. So it was really fun, and also check her out on our Captain Marvel episode.
Oh, there you go. And please write us in with your thoughts on Netflix, Apple TV, Steven Spielberg, Christopher Nolan, Steven Soderbergh, Leaving Neverland, Captain Marvel, the Oscars, Green Book, whatever you want to talk to us about. Please email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. I promise you now we will talk about the topic that we're here to talk about, which is us. Matt, how are you?
I'm okay. We're not doing that. We're not doing that joke.
We're not doing that joke. It's a terrible joke, especially what are we, 30 minutes into this thing? No, no. I'm just kidding. Jordan Peele is a filmmaker of the moment.
Yep.
Isn't he? I mean, like, I can't think of a filmmaker right now who I would say, you know, to anyone, regardless of whether they like horror movies or not, and I've had people ask me, hey, I'm not sure if I like horror movies. Should I see this? I was like, this is a cultural conversation that is happening right now around this filmmaker. You need to go see this so that you and I can have a conversation about this.
It's funny because I don't get normally jealous of friends of mine whom I see with pictures with celebrities.
Yes.
But friend of the show, Gerard Milligan, was in a picture with Jordan Peele, and I was like, shit. I was like you. I was super pumped for him, but I was like, oh man, what's happening? Where's he going?
Right. It's wonderful, right? Like it's wonderful. And you know, regarding Steven Spielberg in this respect, I can't think of a filmmaker Maybe Christopher Nolan, I guess, but Christopher Nolan feels fairly film geeky. I can't think of a filmmaker that speaks to the general population the way that I think Jordan Peele is either doing now or will do shortly. Like I think M. Night Shyamalan sort of got to this point with his first 3 movies, and then obviously things went a little south.
What happened?
I think the Hollywood Reporter or something like that anointed him as the next Spielberg. I could see that kind of label being placed on Jordan Peele, and I'm not singling out Spielberg as Spielberg, but I'm singling out Spielberg as a brand,
as an icon.
Yeah, and the thing there is that his movies at that time were a signpost not only of quality but of like something you had to go out and see. It made the movies magic again.
And that's also like, when I was in film school and when I was saying I'm going to make movies and I'm going to do this other stuff, everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to be, the
you're going to be the next Spielberg.
You're going to be the next Spielberg." Like that's what every parent told every kid that wanted to make movies or like whatever, like that's not saying they're not saying you're going to be the next great filmmaker, which is what they actually are saying, but to have it's the equivalent of Kleenex being tissue. Like
the brand
Band-Aids
is associated with the thing.
being homogenized bandages you stick in, like Coke as soda. Like it's the same
Spielberg
thing. Spielberg as filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly. I think the feeling I get when I watch Jordan Peele's work right now, and the feeling I get when I sit in an audience watching his work, is that at some point we might be describing filmmakers as being appealing? Peel?
Ooh,
peeling back the layers? I don't know what
I
don't know. Or he's the Michael Jordan of filmmaking. I don't know. But at any rate, I feel the thing that was so significant about Get Out was that it was such a cultural touch point. It was such a moment. It was such a film that touched a button that everyone could discuss. And it was so powerful in that respect. So the fact that, Peele has come back, he's got a new film in theaters, and I think the important thing here is to go see it in theaters. As much as I'm, an advocate for Netflix and streaming services and, people like Alfonso Cuarón releasing a film on Netflix, going to see a Jordan Peele movie at theater, I think is a wonderful moment for film goers.
I saw it in Atmos.
Yeah.
Atmos is my favorite proprietary bullshit film technology. Like Atmos, for those of you who don't know, is basically like better seats and real good sound and a good screen. It's not IMAX. I think it's a little bit bigger, but like I think the looms might be different on what they project it with digitally.
I thought Atmos only referred to the sound, like the screen.
Oh,
could be whatever.
maybe that is true, but the one in Queens, like the seats and the screens are newer. I think they just redid the entire theater.
Yeah.
Atmos is probably just the Dolby thing.
Yeah.
But like that's my sweet spot of like, oh, do I need to go see a big or important film? I won't go to IMAX anymore,
right?
Unless it's shot in IMAX, but even then, like because it gets so exorbitantly expensive in the city. I think an Atmos film is like $2 or $3 more, but like the sound you hear the sound design, like in a lot of theaters you don't. So I would highly recommend that for any film you deem important.
But this is also so again the other part of Jordan Peele's work is that it touched
his appeal.
His appeal, yeah. Boy, how many more can we do of these?
I think there's really only the two.
It's really that, right? Is that his films touch a cultural significance in terms of their conversation around American culture.
I mean, they peel back layers.
There you go. I did that one before.
Did you?
Yeah, I thought I did that one.
I thought you said he was
appealing, and we peeled back the layers.
Let's just keep doing the same two then over and over.
Yeah, that's all I got. Obviously, Get Out in 2016, in the wake of a Donald Trump election, was significant in the way that it was about race and and our sort of a modern take on race.
Yeah.
To the point now where going to the sunken place is a commonly used phrase now for a certain type of racial conversation. And I think he's real. Like again, it's only been one movie at this point, up until this point, but that's a really great example of the amplification that winning best an Oscar can do. Is that was an appropriate amplification of what was great about that film as he won Best Screenwriting Oscar. So, what is Us? What are we about?
What are we about? What is Us about? IMDb posits that Us, the film, is a family's serenity turns to chaos when a group of doppelgangers begins to terrorize them.
So the one thing I'll say here is, because I watched the trailer after I watched the movie, do not watch this trailer. I think it's a really well cut trailer, but like I showed my wife Valerie and she was like, I don't need to see this movie. And I was like, yeah, you kind of don't.
Oh, I think you do. I watched the trailer and it got me pumped. It didn't reveal. I didn't think revealed too much. It revealed the premise of the horror.
Revealed the premise of the horror. It revealed how certain characters died. It revealed that they were ongoing battle. It revealed what the premise of the doppelgangers were. It revealed.
Oh, I didn't see that trailer.
Oh,
I saw like trailer 1.
Oh, okay, trailer 2 or whatever it was. The one I watched after the movie, I was like, oh, the joy in seeing this film is being surprised at every turn,
right?
You know, like because it has a lot of little moments in it that are, you know, like revelations upon revelations, and the trailer to me kind of gave away most of it. It was a great case study of like not seeing the trailer.
I'll have to hunt that trailer down because I only saw the first one, and it actually kept the whole film in the house.
No, the second trailer you see the world expanding. You see a certain character dying in exactly the way that they're going to die, and I was like, oh,
Yuck.
wow, you're really giving it all away here.
That's terrible.
So please don't watch that trailer. And in my mind, there's no need if you. I think for the general population, yes, you know, people will need to see a trailer to see this because Jordan Peele isn't quite Steven Spielberg at this point. But if you can, if you're a film lover and you haven't seen the trailer and for some reason you're listening to us at this point, go watch the film blind. You know, I have a wholehearted recommendation for this movie.
I think also, the trailer that I saw, I really liked because watching the trailer then subverted my own expectations because I thought the whole thing was going to be a horror movie in that house.
Right.
And then that was not it.
No, not at all.
And then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So like that actually, in a weird way, it sucks that there's 2 trailers that do 2 different things because I totally condemn the trailer that you're talking about.
Yeah. Without having seen it?
Yeah. I mean, that sucks.
Yeah.
But the one I saw was just like super creepy. So that's the premise of the doppelgangers, and they're in the house with their doppelgangers, and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And like that's it.
Right.
And that really got me jazzed. And then when like sort of things started unfolding, as we'll get into when we get to spoilers, I got more and more excited because like I was like, oh, it might just be a cool thing that like whatever. And he makes good movies, and I'm sure it'll be shot well and it'll be suspenseful. And then when it took the twists that it took, I was like, oh. So yeah.
I will. Okay, so in terms of my first reactions to this movie,
Yes.
the opening I watched Gaspar Noé's film Climax on a plane, which is the definition of a risky click.
Okay.
That movie is not something.
Hey, what's it about?
Climax. Are you being serious? Yeah. It's about a dance troupe in Paris that accidentally has their sangria spiked with LSD, and it goes and it's sitting one night and it spirals out of control into probably one of the most horrific drug trips I've ever seen in my life.
God.
It's horrific. It's terrifying. It's a wonderful film, but just don't watch it with a kid.
It's terrific. It's terrifying. It's wonderful. Shahir down.
It's terrific.
Right.
I think like if you like horror, this is a really great example of physical body horror that's painful to watch, but incredible. Just don't watch it with a 10-year-old girl in the aisle in front of you, which just always makes you nervous.
This film has been modified to fit your screen.
Yeah. I don't know what this film would look like. It was weird that it was on the airplane. Like it was on the airplane system.
Sometimes you hit that and you're like, why would you offer this?
Yeah. You sort of go, well. But the reason I mentioned it is that it has the almost exact same opening shot to Jordan Peele's Us, which is a television screen with VHS tapes, which are basically foreshadowing exactly the kind of movie you're going to get. In the case of Us, you see Chud on one side, cannibalistic humanoids, underworld dwellers, which I think was kind of, as soon as I saw that, and again, I'd been primed by seeing Climax, which has the same sort of device, I was like, okay, this is going to involve that in some way, or
there's an opening preamble of text talking about there's a lot of tunnels, people don't know what they do, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's mysterious enough, and again, it's not like it's not it's not saying exactly what's going to happen because the other one was the Goonies, so there's a lot and Nightmare on Elm Street on the other side. So it opens with this thing about Hands Across America, and I was like, okay, I'm interested here. Like, how is this all? Immediately, what you're seeing is a story where there are all these disparate pieces already coming together in a single shot. Yeah. And I was very intrigued by the way this was going to play out. I will say, my general impression of the film, despite all the praise I've sort of heaped around the surface of Jordan Peele's movie, was that when I watched it, I did think the mythology of this film was far bigger and less pointed than, for example, in Get Out, than this movie could offer.
Yeah.
And that kind of left me feeling somewhat dissatisfied as I was watching it.
Spoiler alert, I agree.
Yeah, okay. Is that a spoiler? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I didn't. I'll get into why later.
Okay, so I think there's a very large mythology behind this film that the film can only touch upon because it's from the perspective of one particular part of it. And what happens there is, unlike Get Out, which has this sort of mythology that a character kind of fully experiences, in that case, even through sort of an awkward VHS tape. This film can only touch upon and leaves you asking so many questions, and to a point where a lot of it doesn't quite make sense.
Well, that's the thing. In Get Out, there are fantastical elements to the horror, but they are in the world that they are presented and that's set up. Everything is still wrapped up in a this can be that because of this. And the things that are sort of more like, how does one, I mean, there's a slight spoiler for Get Out if you haven't seen it, but how does one transplant a brain?
Yeah.
Like,
it's not
but
really
like,
that
but that's
important.
not, but in this, there's, and I think it has a lot to do with scale.
Yeah, there's a scale to this.
There are questions that can break your immersion enough to make it not as enjoyable or as an intoxicating of a world build or like involvement with yourself as Get Out was.
Yeah,
because
the mechanics just simply don't add up a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I want to get into a bunch of that when we get to spoilers, which we'll be getting to soon.
However, so that was my first initial reaction, and then I went home and I kind of just sat with the movie for a little while, and it was this thing again. I saw the film with a friend of mine, Zach, who got me tickets to the Dolby Atmos screening, which was wonderful. Thank you, Zach. And this is one of those films where you don't want to have the conversation immediately after the film, like, what did you think of it? Because immediately we walked out and we were both like, oh, I think that was interesting. It wasn't quite as awe-inspiring, and the world seemed very big. But then I kind of went back and what I did was I kind of just reflected on all of the signposts the movie was giving me. And I think one of the biggest confusing elements there is that Get Out was so pointed about its mythology pointed to a discussion about race relations, right? And in the case of Us, what does the mythology point to in terms of a relationship to American culture today was a little bit obfuscated. It was a little bit vague, and it was a little bit hard to kind of grasp onto.
I am having a hard time grasping onto it, so I hope you've come to a solution.
And the thing wasn't trying to. For me, the way it worked wasn't by coming to a hard, fast solution, like one that's certainly fixed. What it was just reflecting back on all the signposts the movie is doing and all the little details that this movie is doing. And one of the things that I think Jordan Peele does really well in this film is that every moment, every little visual cue matters. Everything matters in this movie. And if you kind of rather than have the film spell it out for you, if you just absorb all those visual cues and go with the feeling of what you think this is about, then I think it becomes rich. And in a way, it's far more ambitious than Get Out. Obviously, the scale
it's way more ambitious than Get Out.
Yeah, the scale kind of points to that already. And for me, I came to a reading of it which allowed me to view it in a way that I thought was wow. The movies that I'm reminded of in an odd way, I think this film the film I'm about to mention does this much more pointedly and stronger in the first viewing than Us does, but that film is Cabin in the Woods. So Cabin in the Woods has this sort of giant mythology behind it that just keeps escalating, getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
I thought about that. I have a theory on that too.
And Cabin in the Woods really nails what its mythology is about by the time you get to the end of that movie, even on the first watch. Whereas Us doesn't quite feel as pointed as Cabin in the Woods. Yet, again, by watching it and then really kind of trying to come to a reading myself and just thinking about it, I think I felt very satisfied by what this film was trying to do. And I also, one thing I said to Zach after the movie was that, we sort of both came out of the movie going, I admired it more than I enjoyed it. But at the same time, I am all for the big swing, like the big punt in a movie. And this is a big punt. And then, but by the end of it, I was like, you know what? I actually kind of really liked where this film was going and what this film was talking about.
I enjoyed it more than I admired it.
You enjoyed it more than you admired it.
So, well, you said the other.
No. I'm trying to parse what that means practically.
What that sort of means is when I walked out, I was like, I kind of had the opposite effect. I think that you did. I was like, that was so cool.
Okay.
Like I was like, I had such a good time. I didn't really like start trying to, or my brain didn't start sort of piecing together like. I think here's how it went. I saw it. I was pumped. I walked out. I was like, that was such a cool ride, and it was so stylish and like and skillful and like masterful in the way that like these things were presented. And then I was like, okay, well, because I know that Get Out had real strong like allegories and things along those lines. I was like, let's try to figure this out. And the more I thought about what the film was trying to say, the more I kept getting hung up on the minutia of the world that they didn't fully develop and or answer.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that hit me is in Get Out, even if you can't answer how do you transplant a brain, the feeling of racial relations and all of the things that he's trying to say still hold true because none of that has to do with the act of transplanting a brain.
Yeah, you could just make the leap of faith that there is a brain transplant.
But in this film, there's a lot that you actually need the mechanics of because it's on such a large scale to work. And with the cabin in the woods analogy, cabin in the woods, tonal like. Tone's the wrong word, but I'm trying to think.
Tone is an important word for this film.
Like the reason why it is able to escalate to where it does is even though it does start going to weird places, we're more easily able to understand it for two reasons. One, the tone is consistent throughout. Two, and this is where I think the film where Us, I think, falters slightly, and it's weird because it's also one of my favorite moments.
Yeah.
Is the information that we get about how the world works in Cabin in the Woods is presented to us relatively organically. Mm-hmm. It's either through conversation or action.
Yeah.
How the world works in Us both times is monologue.
Right. Yeah.
And now listen, Lupita destroys this film. Like, this film does not work without her. She does a phenomenal job. I am engrossed. I am on the edge of my seat whenever she's speaking. Yeah. But when the mechanics of your world are portrayed as like, and now I can't do the voice.
Yeah.
No, we'll tell. Nope. See, she's got it. When it's just like, this is how the world works. And then we pause the scares to go back to how the world works, and then once the explanation is done, we can get back to the scares.
Right.
And that to me took me not in the moment, but when I was dissecting it or trying to find the meaning behind it, I was like, well, this wasn't as effective.
Yeah.
And
So in that respect, I think tone is a really important word here because I think, obviously being Jordan Peele and coming from this sort of incredible sketch comedy show, the Key and Peele show, the sense of like, is there going to be laughs in this movie? There certainly are laughs in this movie. A lot of them come from Winston Duke, and his role as like the lovable schlubby dad, which I really appreciated, by the way, just as a lovable schlubby dad. But I think somewhat lovable. Certainly schlubby. The
schlubbable,
schlubbable, schlubbable dad. There's a T-shirt. But the moments when comedy would enter what was a horrific scene often felt jarring in that they weren't. We should jump into spoilers right now because I think I feel like everything I'm going to say is
Let's
a spoiler.
do it. Spoilers for Us. Don't listen if you haven't seen it.
So these are minor spoilers at this point. But for example, a joke that I think didn't work was I have the highest kill count. Like where all the family are kind of going saying, I killed this, I killed this, that's two, that's one, that's saying. That's a joke that I felt was very out of the world of the film that we're experiencing and not quite believable and not that, and because of that, not that funny.
And the children get real used to death real fast. Actually, everyone kind of does, but then, and I will say this, then all of a sudden they're not.
Yeah.
Like, it goes between, like, this is a fun, let's kill zombies-esque sort of thing.
Yeah.
Back and forth to, like, this is meaningful and you're supposed to be terrified.
So, but a joke that I think did work, slightly bitter, and because it felt more organic to what was happening, was Ophelia call the police.
Yeah.
And then Ophelia, which is their version of Amazon, starts
Alexa,
starts playing "Fuck the Police."
Yeah.
I think that's a clever interjection of humor in a horrific scene that feels organic to what is happening and is still very funny.
Yeah.
And I think the problem was the balance of the jokes was more of I've got a higher kill count than it was "Fuck the police." You know.
Yeah.
So that tonal problem is definitely apparent throughout the film.
Another thing that got me too, and I think this is my sort of second to last criticism of the film, is the second that they left the house, I was no longer scared for any main character.
Yeah.
Because they set up the secondary family, and I was like, oh, they're probably going to die, and then they all died, and that's cool. But then, like, the second that they all died, I knew for a fact that no one in that family, in our main family, was in any danger whatsoever.
Right, because they die so sort of comedically and amusingly.
The film set it up as these 4 people are safe now.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. And so then, and that's another thing, too, when I started going back and reflecting, I was like, I think I was along for the ride because it is presented to you in such a skillful manner.
Yeah.
But then when thinking about it, I was like, well, why wasn't I scared? Well, I wasn't scared because I knew the movie told me in very few words, but in certain ways, that these characters are safe. And since these characters are safe, well, okay, then I guess I'll start trying to decompress what actually is trying to be said through the film.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, but then the world kind of gets in the way. So but here's the thing. I want to rewind a bit. When they're in that house, and the doppelgangers show up, and the entirety of that whole sequence, fucking terrifying.
Right.
But there's a hard switch, and it might. Do they do the kill count joke right as they're leaving the house?
They do it after leaving the second house that they're leaving.
Yeah.
But the jokes around the doppelgangers kind of, well, the when it's not Winston Duke's fault because he's wonderful in this film, but he's kind of tasked with being comedic relief during those scenes. And whenever he does, it takes you out of the terror of the scenes. And I think that, you know, like you say, from the sort of the immediacy of enjoying the film, it's not particularly scary. You know, like there are moments where things are happening that
there's jump moments and there's moments that are unnerving. There was a moment, I think, when the young boy, evil version doppelganger, like does some like crawl leap or scurry. No, it was the moment when they're all standing in the driveway
and they do a little
and
clap.
they go or whatever, and they just scurry into the underbrush on the sides. I was like, fuck.
Wait, see, no, the thing was I wasn't particularly scared at that moment.
Fear is the wrong thing, but it was the anticipation of that was creepy. Something bad is coming. That's not fear.
Yeah,
like
it's not the like. In the movie climax, for example, I'm using that as a reference because it's the last sort of, it's not an outward horror, but it's the last scary film I saw. There is a sense of dread and terror that comes with that movie at every turn. That's not the case with.
I also want to say, Us doesn't have to be scary.
It doesn't have to be, and I think the
Cabin in the Woods isn't scary.
No, it's not scary at all. Yeah, but I think the reason I'm still on the Us train is that ultimately I liked what this film had to say about American culture.
Let's talk about it because I am a little confused, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I want to go straight up and say that I really enjoyed Us in the theater. I was like raging with it, like it was such a fucking great experience to watch.
It's very skillfully made.
Yeah, I didn't have that afterburn of like when I was thinking about it, knowing exactly what it was trying to say, or at least having a solid enough idea that I couldn't poke holes in.
Right, and I think again the thing that I kind of also like about it is that it's open to interpretation because there's no like. like in Get Out, a racial kind of dynamic to it, where it's like specifically, this was a film about race.
Sure.
This is a film that has many possible interpretations available to it. So the spoiler side of this is that underneath all of us is a society of doppelgangers that are tethered to us, which enact our almost our every movement, but they're and we're not exactly sure why. This is part of that problem with the mythology being like a little too big.
Yeah.
We're not exactly sure how the mechanics of it work. We don't know. We don't know and understand how the tethered know what it is we're doing. They seem to live in this sort of almost cavernous-like hallways where these are just sort of empty rooms. They eat raw rabbit for meals, as opposed to real food, which sort of like inherently kind of gets you away from this idea that I think the film is intrinsically part of, which is like, how do people grow a soul? Is it nature? Is it nurture? You would suggest that in some way the nature of what the tethered are doing would mean that they would have to be different from us. But for some reason, they're exactly the same. And so we don't understand what the technology is. We don't understand who did it,
why they did it. You kind of glean that it might be a government experiment to control people, but then they just abandon it, which is weird because if they did do that, why wouldn't... Like, there's a lot of weird plot holes because, like, okay, if it's a shadow government trying to control people and it failed, even though it seems like it didn't fail, they just kill them all. Let's straight up. They wouldn't let them just, like, live down there or whatever. They wouldn't just, like, whatever. And if they did, like, they'd lock it in a vault, and they didn't do that. There's, like, a door to an amusement park. So like
it's very
also, I mean, if they're eating only raw rabbits, okay, rabbits reproduce at an incredible rate. Like that's that makes sense. Sure. What are the rabbits eating?
Also, they probably would have died off from some bacterial disease at some early
and
point.
There's no like everything is sort of clean. Also, there's a couple other things that bugged me too, just on this minuscule level. They're all wearing sort of regular clothes in one scene, and then when they become the tethered and they hatch the plan due to some machinations we'll get to, they all get red jumpsuits, one golf glove, and a pair of giant sewing shears.
Yeah,
and I'm like.
This plan seems very elaborate for a team for a society of what you would argue is how would you describe them? I guess you would describe them as, I mean, the word that comes to mind is tethered.
Tethered's a great term.
It's a great catch-all term because it basically means the society that is connected to us without autonomy of their own.
And also, like it shows them like mirroring our actions on the surface world, but like they're still in a hallway, so like that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But what I like about it. What I like about the ambition of what the story is trying to do is that it does point to an open reading of class culture. So in the film, for me, there are three different stratospheres of class, and you go back to the old sort of Marxist kind of ideology of the middle class, the upper, and the proletariats. And in this, you've got a family, the main family, who, as personified by Winston Duke, at some point, is envious of an upper class that's beyond them, and that's the Tim Heidecker family.
Yep.
Like they talk about the fact that they have a boat, he got the flare gun, and Winston Duke comes back and he's always kind of like, oh, they rubbed it in our, he has to rub it in our face, like his house isn't as nice as that house. They're always kind of like looking at the ease of which. But beneath this middle class family is an entirely different culture, which they haven't considered at all, that is entirely connected to them without them ever realizing it, and as the film will reveal, connected in a way that is kind of profound later on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing that I think is interesting is basically what happens is this entire culture and society below them fights back and decides to like retake their ground, but in a weird way they don't know what to do with it. This Hands Across America thing is this sort of weird, pointless act.
It's a memory of a child that got swap-a-rooed.
Yeah, but the thing about the Hands Across America thing was that it was ultimately kind of a failed, pointless act,
right?
Which is really, I think, a really
because America has deserts.
Well, no, but not just that, but like the point, it sort of it.
Well, that's why it could never work. I mean, no matter how much money you get, it's because America has deserts.
No, but not even a logistics thing. It's this notion that we can solve the homeless crisis by doing this sort of meaningless act, and in fact, it did nothing of the sort. America can't solve a major class function through one through
charity event.
One charity event. It just doesn't work that way. You have to examine the underlying causes, and that's not what that act did. And so I think all of this gets summed up, and I feel like I'm whiffling around this because I think it's such a big idea, and it's so open to interpretation. There's many ways to read this, but the way that I kind of landed on reading this is it's this sense of a class culture that is divided amongst itself. So you've got this upper level, the Heideckers, you've got this middle level, the Peter Nyong'a's family, and then you've got this lower level that's almost not seen that fights back and doesn't and ultimately doesn't know what to do with this newly regained power, and it's an ignored class.
But I have it. So here's the because I thought that too, but then I kind of poked holes in my theory when I did that.
It's totally hole pokeable
because, for instance, the tethered class, let's call it, right?
Yeah.
Want to take back the world, but both other classes that we are introduced to don't even know that the tethered exists.
Yeah.
And now that to me, like it's a super secret thing that no one has known about. Therefore, it is not something that like, for instance, it's not the middle classes in this. I'm using this in the analogy. It's neither of the classes that are being attacked's fault that the tethered are oppressed. It's not, because they don't know. They have no idea. And if they did, it's not presented. So I have a hard time feeling like any sympathy for the tethered because they're just going on this. I mean, other than like a humanitarian sort of like you were an experiment, etc. But like they're going on a murderous rampage for no reason because they kind of like, I get the logic of why they're doing it, but it doesn't let me empathize with them. I also don't particularly empathize with the idea that, like, how do I put it? I've heard a lot of stuff, and you kind of went around this. I don't think this was your actual point about, like, the film as a representation of the fear of the other, right?
Yeah. There's actually I've got a quote from Jordan Peele that points to that. Would you like me to read
that?
Yeah,
please.
So Jordan Peele says, right now my country is going through an obsession with the outsider and a fear of the invader and the other. This is a movie about the fact that maybe we are our own worst enemy.
That reading to me is probably the strongest, but it also doesn't really play to the sense of like fear of the other. It does. Here's the thing. Every horror film, for most part, is fear of the other.
Right.
Like, you can put that on most any...
It's the Lovecraftian racist trope.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like what Jordan Peele said there because, the idea that we are our own worst enemy, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And but in this movie, it also doesn't present that as what it's being said. Granted, is the physical threat to one of us the other one of us in this film? Sure. And can you take that and look at that and be like, oh, I get it, but the plot has nothing to do with that thought. Like, what the machinations of what is happening in the story don't have to do with that. It's the physical embodiment that does. Right. So that's like another level, but it's not. Get Out was so interconnected.
Yeah, Get Out is a sharper film.
And I don't want to poo-poo on this movie because I really liked it.
Yeah.
But the more I was disappointed that the more I thought about it, the more I was like, to the point where I was like, I was worried about doing this podcast because I was like, I don't want to sound like I don't like it because I did, but I can still, the more I thought about it, the less I was able to just sort of like seep and enjoy and like be in the visceral world that was presented to me because it was so big and ambitious.
Right.
And when you do that, you are going to have your audience start questioning things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I don't disagree with that reading. That's kind of my initial reading of the film as well, was I kind of wanted to like it, but I felt like it didn't quite work. But then when I like this big punt idea, and I like the idea that the metaphor works on an open level, like it is open to interpretation and open to reading. Like, the events happen. I don't disbelieve that the events of the film happen, and I don't disbelieve the mechanics of the film happening because the film is filled with so much detail and so many like signposts about what is happening around you. But to me, part of the class culture problem in America is that there is this unknown class that we don't really talk about. Like most of American politics has to do with either the absolute upper wealthy or the middle class. And what Hands Across America as a signpost kind of pointed to is how inefficiently we deal with with extreme poverty. To the point is we don't even recognize that it exists in some cases. And I think that as a metaphor, again, it's a metaphor, not really an accurate class description.
No, I get that.
Like Get Out. I think that actually works really well because this middle class family is confronted with this idea that they have a shadow that they've never considered, that they didn't even realize existed. And for them, there's a terror in that. Like if the other film that I think kind of sort of got into this a little bit was Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises, which is that there was the idea that there was going to be an uprising of the lower classes of into Gotham, and it was like everyone had been living high on the hog for so long, and that there was this class that they hadn't even considered. I know Dark Knight Rises is a problematic reference, but that's just one I can kind of grab on, and I think that was, for me, that's what works in this film, because the film is also a celebration of that class's triumph. Like at the end of it, the film, we see the Hands Across America kind of working, and we realize how pointless it was. And it is a mirror back on this idea that we could even think that joining hands and doing this charity thing was going to solve all these problems. Now, it's not a literal metaphor because the literal mechanics of it make no sense, as we've kind of both alluded to. Right. The literal mechanics of how there has to be some kind of supernatural element to it. But again, he does reference that in the idea that the tethered are an attempt to identify the soul of everyone. And the daughter also says at one point, again, it's a throwaway line, she says, "Did you know the government injected fluoride into the water to control people?" It's it's enough of a throwaway line to kind of just understand the mechanics.
So here's the thing. I love it when things of that nature aren't explained. But I love that the idea that they made say they're clones, right?
Yeah.
The tethered themselves have to share a soul with the other person because humans can't make souls, and then that means that's why they're sort of linked and they're tethered, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And then when they're talking about them as a shadow and how they had to mirror them, but they didn't have the tools and techniques and technologies or resources, let's say, to do the things. I remember the C-section line about the second child.
Yeah.
She had to cut out the kid herself because they didn't have the thing the doctors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Though, granted, by the movie's logic, I guess they would have that doctor. The doctor would be there and doing it, just maybe not with the right tools. Doesn't matter. But I love that unknown angle. That's the stuff I am not angry at. That's the stuff that gets you thinking oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
What hooks me up, though, is the logistics to get to that angle. For instance, does everyone in the country have this? How big is this? The mechanics of running it and having it not be that to me is what pulls me out. I love a good supernatural-esque, or I won't even call it supernatural, science or pseudoscience that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
That transplanting a brain.
Yeah.
That's
Cabin in the Woods, the mechanics of it.
The mechanics of the Cthulian dynamic.
But the thing is Cabin in the Woods is so good at is it contains the parameters of the world. So you go, even if I don't quite understand it, I know it exists within
There
these
are
boundaries.
offices in multiple countries that take care of it, that have to do it with these groups at certain points around the globe to stop the old ones from waking.
The boundaries kind of make sense to you. Whereas the boundaries of this film expand out by the end of the movie to be boundless.
Yeah.
And that is it is difficult to read.
Yeah. So I guess it's funny because it's the physical versus the metaphysical boundaries. I can buy into no metaphysical boundaries because we don't understand them, and then therefore that makes sense in my own logical process. Where I understand feeding a group of people and knowing that resources have to be implemented to keep sort of things alive. I mean, to believe that this happened, and I do want to get to the final twist in a minute too, which I loved.
Yeah.
You have to believe that over the course of around, 15, 20 years, this society underground still exists, had enough resources to survive and didn't die of a disease, and none of them, well, actually, the supernatural part does make me believe that none of them, actually would leave because they're sort of stuck downstairs. But then how does Red get upstairs?
There's a power outage and she gets upset. I 100% agree with everything you're saying in that the physical mechanics of this don't make sense. And I felt that way when we were watching it, and I still feel that way now. And it distracted from my pleasure of the film. To me, the metaphysical side of it does make sense, and it's big and it's ambitious, and I kind of love that.
I love the fact that we both felt the same things, but at different times of our experiences with the film. For me, I didn't feel any of this when I was watching it.
Right.
And then upon reflection, I was like, oh, okay.
So
and
oddly, I felt that way during the movie.
Yeah.
Which is, I was
that's so weird.
But it was afterwards that I was kind of like, no, you know what? I do enjoy.
Maybe we're tethered.
Maybe we're too. You know what? I just rewatched Paul P.T. Anderson's film, The Master.
Oh, it's so good.
Which is kind of about these two people who have like tethered souls. Anyway, the other thing, again, the film is so rich in signposts. Like there's so many little details. And what you could argue is that. I think from a critical point of view, you could argue that there's so many different signposts here that he's actually covering up the fact that he hasn't got a real solid grasp on this world. You could argue, because
sure.
there's so many. But like the one I come back to that I think is sort of interesting is the Jeremiah 11:11. Like the signpost is held at some point, and the character is holding it up. And what I love is that character is the instigation point because we see that character die and then we see his doppelganger later out. So we realize that the process is happening.
He's the first one with his hands out for Hands Across America, and you don't realize it because this looks like he's like praising the sun or whatever.
And then he's got blood drops on his hand because he's killed his doppelganger.
Yeah.
Exactly. But Jeremiah 11:11, which also is again a nice symbiotic sort of like 2 1s, 2 1s, kind of thing. Therefore, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will bring evil upon them, which they shall not be able to escape, and they shall cry unto me, and I will not hearken unto them. Which I kind of I love this idea that there is a tipping point between these three class cultures that is inescapable as far as the the absolute lower class is concerned. And the shadow figure of Lupita Nyong'o's character, her name is Adelaide, and her name down in the tethered world is Red. When she basically says there once was a girl who had a shadow, and the shadow couldn't live the way that the girl did, and that was just inescapable from now on, and that was a notion that was no longer tenable.
Yeah.
I think that's a sort of wonderful examination or a wonderful sort of just portrait of America.
And the line of who are you people? We're Americans is great. And also, if you want to get into it, you could also argue back to sort of your point and a little against my initial one where like, let's not even, I don't know. I was going to try to use the tethered as sort of like, middle America, super like working class type people that like sort of were forgotten and then rose up and now, hello, Trump. Like that's
you could make that argument.
But again, I think there's your point of a lot of signposts, don't exactly get you to your destination any faster. They just sort of have you go around and around and around. And you'll see a bunch of neat stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Let's talk. So how did you feel about the final sort of twist, which I feel is a take up of and not the same thing, but definitely a callback to the monster coming back a little bit right at the end before the film in a horror movie.
Oh, right, yeah. So I guess my problem there is kind of the problem I had with again. I'm always talking about Christopher Nolan films at this point. I'm not a Nolan like.
He's in your brain.
He's just in my brain. He's incepted his way in. But it was like the ending of The Prestige, which was an ending I saw coming like very early on.
Oh, I didn't.
Like I kind of felt like that was when I first saw the two girls at the beginning of the movie. I made a mental note at that point. I was like, these two girls got switched.
I should have, but I didn't.
Right.
Like I think I was distracted by everything else.
I'm not saying that to
sleight
say,
of hand.
I'm not saying that to say I'm smart or anything. What I'm saying is that the issue there is that story keeps coming back throughout. It is filtered throughout the film so many times, and we see that scene so many times that my brain went, there's got to be more to this than what we're just seeing here. And what I'm seeing here is, and the way I would resolve this story is if the two girls were switched.
I was distracted by the shiny filmmaking, I think the magician's trick, the sleight of hand,
Right.
was very effective. Even though if I don't know, if I wasn't watching, I could probably follow the ball, right?
Right.
You know, like,
I think the only thing there is that I was following the ball and knowing where it was going, and
again, it goes back to how we both sort of, I think, experienced this movie.
But 9 times out of 10, like sometimes you'll follow the ball and be completely wrong about it.
Sure.
And so it's only when you follow the ball and like if you're watching a magic trick and you know exactly how they did it, that by the time they do it, you're kind of like, cool. Like
Lost.
Yeah. Well, that's another discussion.
People guessed the thing in season 2 and they're like, nope, and then that was the thing.
Yeah. Well, that's another discussion. I still like this idea that, you know what it is? I like the idea that a film this pop, pop culture has got such a big set of ideas behind it. Like it's got such a lot to chew on that what the sort of walking out of the film got for me was excited to see it again. You know what I mean? And there are many films where I understand the messaging, I understand how it works. Like, Cabin in the Woods is a really good example, which is that I loved what it did. I would be happy to rewatch it again. I've never actually rewatched it again because I kind of feel like I've gotten most of what I need to get out of it.
It doesn't have a lot of cultural things to say other than the world's fucked, so fuck it.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of the message of Cabin in the Woods, which is like...
I think it had a lot to say about like the nature of storytelling and our relationship to what we need out of stories. But
yes, but from an in the narrative sort of perspective of what is important to the characters, and therefore what is it sort of portraying to you as sort of important, is like, the world's fucked. Oh well, guess you should fuck everyone. Bye. Like
whatever it is. But the point there is that in a way, a film that is entirely hermetically sealed oftentimes doesn't require you to revisit it, and I think that's smart. That's good filmmaking. And in this way, this film is much looser and bigger and grander, and I'm excited to rewatch it with a new frame of reference in mind. One of the I read this sort of interview with Jordan Peele in Sight and Sound magazine, and he talks about the greatest scare in horror films being from The Shining. And he says the greatest scare in horror cinema is when the camera turns the corner in the Overlook Hotel and finds a pair of identical twins standing at the end of the hallway. It's far worse than a mere jump scare. The image of an inescapable, expectant terror casts an icy chill on the back of the neck, sending a shiver down the spine. It's the protagonist in motion and something waiting for them patiently and calmly. He also cites The Silence of the Lambs there. And I think... I love that is his reference point for what is scary. I don't think he kind of gets to that scary in this movie, but as sort of a side step from that, I think The Shining is a really good example of the kind of horror that Peele aspires to, because The Shining is a really great example of a film that has this grand mythology behind it that the film is almost too small to kind of touch on. But what happens for me every time I watch The Shining is I'm re-implanting that mythology on it. So I'm watching it in a different way every time I watch it. And there's a great... actually, it's a terrible documentary, but it's sort of a great idea for a documentary called Room 237, which is where all these conspiracy theories are kind of landed on The Shining, and all these people are talking about all these conspiracy theories around The Shining. But I love that I could rewatch Us with a sort of renewed sense of like, what could this possibly mean? Mm-hmm. Now, ordinarily, that's like that might be the sign of poor filmmaking, but I think in this case it's the sign of like sheer ambition that isn't quite fully realized but is exciting. Like I'm excited by the sheer ambition of what Peele might be trying to say in this, as more than I am of the perfectly executed metaphors of some other films. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly said. I think the breadth at which the multiple breadths and the depth of them that is presented with Us, I would much rather see, even if after the fact I pick it apart in my own brain, than most of the stuff that's like, it's actually about classism, like other films that sort of like try to do like. This is, as you said, it's filmmaking and storytelling on an incredibly ambitious scale. And yeah, it doesn't all hit, but I would much rather see this than things sort of playing it safe or playing like with a totally comfortable scale. The performances are nuts. It's shot beautifully. Soundtrack and score. It's so good.
That retake of I've Got Five on it. But at the end of the film, again, just such a wonderful example of like Peele knowing that everything matters.
Yeah, there's a definite linkage throughout this entire thing, which I really, really enjoyed. And it goes back to everything sort of linking together. The tiny pieces link together perfectly, much like the tethered link back to their own doppelganger. Like, that's all sort of great. It's when it gets bigger than the scope of our characters that it starts to really pose questions for me. And for me, outside of the initial viewing, as I said, it starts my brain starts picking things apart, and then whatever. I'm looking forward to watching it again and then seeing if I can just get my brain back into Funtown, as opposed to sort of dissecting it.
The film. There's another film that kind of came to mind when I thought about like the way to read this film, and that's Michael Haneke's film Caché or Hidden, which has this sort of like deeper mythology to it that is very big and very obfuscated in the film. It's hard to like figure out what it is. In fact, you can only sort of decipher it from seeing one image in the film, which is played over the credits, and it's not even clear exactly what happened.
Okay.
And that sort of plays into the title. But I love that idea that a film can, like invites you to like interpret things, and it's not spelling everything out exactly for you. And in the hands of a less skilled filmmaker, that comes across as problematic, and it feels inefficient. It can feel like poor filmmaking, like someone doesn't know how to tell a story. But that's not the case with Jordan Peele. Is like, I feel in this case he knows how to tell a story. He's telling a bigger story, and he's trying to wrestle with this big idea. And it's not always clear. It's messy. It doesn't make sense. You pointed out 100 things that are absolutely correct. The logic of this is inoperable in many ways, but logic for me doesn't matter as much as ambition. And ambition in this case trumps logic in a way that is profound and beautiful and weird. And the thing that I also loved the most about this is watching it in a movie theater in Times Square of all places, is everybody you can't walk out of this movie without having a conversation about it. Everyone was talking about what had happened.
Yeah.
And everyone was trying to figure it out and decipher it and having a conversation. And it reminds me of like, that thing when you would go to the movies and you weren't just placated by the movie. You weren't just like, given some candy.
Yeah, yep.
You had to like wrestle with the movie. And I think that in itself is is like a wholehearted recommendation to go see this in a movie theater. And like if Spielberg or Nolan or whatever wants to talk about why people need to go see this in a movie, it's that reason. It's not the optic, it's not the sound, it's not the image quality. It's the fact that movies should get you to have a conversation, and this is a movie that gets you to have a conversation, and I love that.
Yeah, that's damn good. I agree.
Yeah.
This has been the only podcast about the film Us. Shahir, when we're not so happy together, where can folks find you?
You can find. I'm trying to think of a joke, but the only one I can come up to is the song "Happy Together" was in the Wong Kar-wai movie "Happy Together," and so you could find us at the Iguatu Falls in Brazil, which is where that film took place. That's a deep cut.
That's less of a joke and more of an essay.
Yeah, that's too deep a cut. But you can find me making some deep cuts at my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD.com. Matt, when you are not realizing that we are two peas in a pod of a tethered soul, where can people find your half of my soul?
You can find Shahir's soul in my body at mattthewkrl.com for my life and works. Ursula Skelter, the number 4 PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, you can check out some of my work over at Extra Credits on YouTube. We when this comes out, what's going to be out? The Gilgamesh saga of Bronze Age mythology will be completed. Also, we just did a fantastic one-off on the Boston Massacre. Oof. And that's a we something I really liked about it. We do patron hangouts on that, and we discuss with certain tier patrons about questions about things, and one of them was sort of talking about, like, on the Extra History series in particular, how do we sort of levy with ourselves, talking about conquerors and wars and horrible things, stuff like that. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we, while doing a narrative structure, we also make sure that we show sort of, whenever there are two sides of a thing, we show both sides as the protagonist.
Yeah.
We never sort of just stick with one and continue down the line. If that's so, like, we come from it from the soldier's perspective, we come from it from the townspeople's perspective, and then we come from it from John Adams' perspective.
Right.
So, like, it's a great little one-off. If you need an introduction to that sort of work that I do over there, check out that one. It's very, very good. The art's fantastic by Ali Artham. Anyway, we will chat with you next week. I'm not even going to say what we're doing yet because I don't know.
Because we don't know. I have no idea. But you can email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com with your suggestions or your thoughts and theories about us.
Tell us.
Not us.
No, both. Either have it be about us or be about us.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you then.
Bye.